Hey guys, surprise, it's me. You thought you could get rid of me, but you just can't. Mr. Brubaker had contacted me and said he needed the tallest, best looking, smartest guy that was available. That guy wasn't available, so here I am. But what he asked me to do is give you guys some information about the Revolutionary War as you guys start your novel unit that you're going to do. So I'm just going to kind of give you a quick summary of what happened. So this is going to be kind of like a crash course, except without John Green and all the cool graphics. So we're just going to cover a couple of things, right? So we're going to start right out with the what. What was the American Revolution? So basically, the American Revolution was the process that the American colonies went through in order to gain their independence from England. England had controlled the colonies since about 1608 when they started their first successful English settlement with Jamestown. So what the revolutionary process was a series of a few things: public demonstrations that the colonists did to show their displeasure with the British, the writing of the Declaration of Independence, and then ultimately them fighting and winning the Revolutionary War, and after that being recognized as an independent nation. So if we're talking about the who was involved in this, there's basically going to be three groups. Those three groups are going to be the British government, who was in control of the colonies, the 13 colonies at the time. The loyalists were the Americans that lived within the colonies that remained loyal to the English government and considered themselves English citizens. And then the patriots, which if you're from New Madison and go to Tri Village High School, you should be familiar with what a patriot is. But the patriots were those people that were living within the colonies at the time that became distrustful of the English government and then started to desire to separate themselves from that government and form their own nation. Those are the people then are also going to form what's going to become known as the Continental Army, which is the army that's going to fight against the British Army in order to win that independence from the United States. Going to be headed by none other than George Washington. So if we talk about we go from the who to the when did it actually occur? So the American Revolution, the Revolutionary period starts after the French and Indian War is over. The French and Indian War was when the British fought against the French and their Indian allies for control of the land within North America. The British came out of that victorious, and they signed a treaty that ended that war in 1763. So immediately after that happened is kind of when the Revolutionary period began. So most historians are going to tell you that the Revolutionary period began in about 1763. It's going to go on and go through the processes that I mentioned earlier until the Revolutionary War is over and they signed the Treaty of Paris, which recognizes the United States as an independent nation in 1783. So from 1763 to about 1783 is what's commonly known as the Revolutionary period. If we go to the next W, where did this happen? This is in the 13 American colonies within North America. So those were the areas that England had control, all the way from Maine to the north to Georgia in the south, and from the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to the Mississippi River. That was British territory. So that's where the fighting is going to occur. It's going to be mostly along the Atlantic coast in some of our larger cities, places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and then ultimately ending in Yorktown, which is in Virginia on the Chesapeake Bay. So if we look at why this all happened, it really, as I mentioned, it was because of the end of the French and Indian War. What happened with the French and Indian War is that fighting that war, England had incurred a huge debt. And in order to pay back that debt, they began to tax the colonies. So that's why originally, right after the French and Indian War is over is when a lot of people think that it started. So they began to tax the colonies. So you're going to hear of different taxes that you may be familiar with, things like the Navigation Act, the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Tea Act, all of those different things like that. So then as they did that, and the colonists became more upset with British rule, then they started the demonstrations. Those demonstrations led to clashes with the British government. Then you have things that came up like the Boston Massacre. And then as a result of that, then England puts more control on the colonies and comes up with things like the Intolerable Acts. Put a lot of restrictions on the colonists and started to violate their rights. And then as a result of that violation, that's when the colonists really started to move more towards the idea of winning their independence from England, right? Which is exactly what they did. So in your book, you're going to see some people that are going to volunteer and going to be part of that Continental Army. and the formation of that army and fighting against the British and ultimately winning that war against England is what's going to win the United States its independence and what is going to lead to the creation of the independent nation that we all know and love, which is the United States. So, USA. I'm out.